نحمد الله العلي العظيم ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله النبي الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. أما بعد، فقال الله تبارك وتعالى: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون ولا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم أولئك هم الفاسقون. وقال الله تبارك وتعالى: والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. My respected brothers, elders, dear friends, there are some things in this world that are absolute realities. There is no doubt in them, and there is no room for doubt in them. The stronger the human being is connected with those realities, the more likely it is that they will be on the right path. The further the human being strays from these realities, then the further they stray from their own interests. The Quran has more than 6,000 verses. About 500 or so relate to ahkam, halal and haram, various aspects of life, salat, saum, zakat, hajj, nikah, talaq, taking loans, repaying loans, sales, so on and so forth. The remainder, which is the overwhelming majority of the verses, focuses on three things. And these three things, in various ways, are presented over and over and over again. These are absolute realities. And this is why there is so much emphasis given on them. At every step, the human being is being reminded, encouraged, sometimes warned that you better attach yourself with these three things, because these three things are the core and the root and foundation for all your success. And a weakness in your attachment to these things is the basis for all your failures. What are these three things? The first is Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and joined to that, the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His beautiful attributes, His power, His wisdom, His knowledge, His control, ability to give life, to take away life, to give respect, to take it away, to raise people, to lower people, to forgive and pardon, to protect and nurture, to give things shape, to create something and then create many, many duplicates of it, to use one life form to create other life forms. His glory, His majesty. This is the cornerstone of all belief. The next thing is Risala, which means prophethood, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the concept of prophethood, how it works, some of the people who were appointed, as prophets by Allah, what they did, how they conveyed their message, what they went through, and what the outcomes were. All of the stories of the Anbiya alayhimu salam are tied in with this theme. And the third is Akhirah, the afterlife, the life after this one. That this world and all the things in it are temporary, and after this, all humans will be called to account. Nothing will be ignored or omitted. And that is the abode of everlasting bliss and happiness or everlasting torment and pain. These three concepts make the cornerstone for Islamic beliefs. They form the cornerstone for the da'wah of all the Anbiya alayhi salatu wassalam, and the message conveyed in all the scriptures Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed. These are three absolute realities. The stronger the human being is attached to this, the clearer their path is. The further they drift, the more obscure things become, and they start losing their way. All the mistakes made by human beings are a result of a detachment to these three things. Every mistake is a result of a weakness of attachment in the form of iman and yaqeen, conviction in these three things. A person has iman in these three things, they have upheld the belief system of all the Anbiya alayhi salatu wassalam. A person who does not have iman in these things has let go of a message that was repeatedly conveyed to mankind over 100,000 times. Please stay focused here. I need you to stay focused. If you go on your devices, I'll take up my phone, I'll go on my device too. Would you like it? A man is where his eyes are. If you're looking at something, that's where you are. If you're sitting in this gathering and you're looking at anything other than me, then that's where you are. So stay focused. These talks are important. We're talking about critical things. We're not sitting here talking about the weather or the sports. Stay focused. Our detachment from these three things has led to our destruction over and over and over again. And our attachment with these three things is what has saved us whenever we have been saved. When we talk about the challenges of our youth, or the challenges of our sisters, or the challenges of our elders, it's all stemming from our attachment to these three things. They say that indecency is spreading. Indecent acts, illicit relationships, various forms of haram contact are spreading. Where is it coming from? Go to the source. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "La yazni zani hina yazni wa huwa mu'min." When someone commits zina, it can only be if they are not in a complete state of iman. There is something wrong with their iman in that moment. That's why they went ahead and did such and such thing. Otherwise, it's not possible. And these three things are the cornerstone of iman. Attachment to Allah, attachment to His Rasul, awareness of Akhirah. They missed out somewhere in one of these three things or all of them. And that's when they reached that point, after maybe many steps, they reached the point where they committed that act. But if a person was busy safeguarding these three things because they are the key to all success, and if one of them falls, all failure comes our way. If a person was busy in protecting these three things, they would not have gone in that direction. But they became distracted from these three, and thus they started going in another direction, chasing after something else, another pursuit. لا يسرق السارق حين يسرق وهو مؤمن. A person cannot steal while they are in a state of iman. His awareness and attachment with Allah weakened. Awareness and attachment of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his teachings weakened. Awareness and attachment with Akhirah weakened. And the urge to fulfill this worldly desire or get that worldly gain became stronger than the desire for Akhirah. Hence the sin occurred. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with intelligence. So we should use that intelligence to go to the source of our problems instead of the symptoms. We can talk about the symptoms all day. With this intelligence, we go back to where did it all start? Something happened at a foundational level which led to cracks in the structure. All efforts to save and safeguard our iman, our society, our future progenies and generations must lead in this direction. If it's not, then it's something else. It's not me. And all things that weaken our bond with these three things need to be addressed and removed. Because they are at the root of our problems. So who are we connected to today? Who are we attached to? You can only be attached to someone if you're exposed long enough to them. If you have no exposure to them, how are you going to be attached? Exposure to Allah is through His book, through His remembrance, through talks of His greatness and His wonders. This is exposure to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Staying with people who fear Him, who know Him, who are close to Him. Exposure to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is through His teachings, His blessed ahadith, His noble sunnah. Studying it, staying in an environment where it's being practiced. Exposure to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in this time and age means exposure to an environment where sunnah is being emphasized and other ways are discarded. An attachment to akhirah involves giving up temporary worldly gains for the sake of something bigger. Why? Because akhirah is bigger. This world and all its pleasures and all its things, temporary. They have no real existence. Akhirah and all its conditions are real. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it al-waqi'ah. It is the true event, al-haqqa. It is haqq. Al-tammatul kubra. It is the greatest calamity. When akhirah becomes the greatest calamity in someone's mind and heart, then all the problems of the world become small. When Allah becomes akbar in someone's heart, everything becomes asghar. The whole world becomes small. Our issue is not that we live in this world and we're suffering because of it. Our issue is that we do not understand the world because we have not recognized the creator of the world. And because we are not occupied enough with the creator, we have become infatuated with the created things. And so off we go, seemingly on a road that has no end, chasing one worldly thing after another, after another, after another. Everyone is responsible. Parents are responsible for what happens in their home, what their children are exposed to. What things are said, what things are seen, what things are heard in that home. How much of it is Iman? How much of what we see and hear and do is related to Iman? And then creating such an environment outside of the home that our youngsters can go to and get that boost of Iman. In the form of social circles, in the form of environment of the masjid, in the form of Islamic schools and institutions of knowledge and learning. We build and build and build layers upon layers upon layers of Iman for our youngsters, so that no matter what pursuit they are following in terms of worldly endeavors, they're surrounded by Iman. And if not, what if there are no layers? What if there is no insulation? Then we are exposing them to the opposite of these three things. And then we put ourselves in a situation where we have no defense against whatever is outside. When we build our connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we pray to Him in different ways. Sometimes by raising our hands, sometimes by standing up in salat, sometimes by doing some other act that pleases Him and begging Him to accept that act. We appeal to Him in different ways. As long as a person is turning towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they cannot turn to indecency. Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. We have issues with our youngsters, getting into relationships. Parents are worried, upset. Society is falling apart. The moral fabric of the communities is deteriorating. It means a stronger effort is required. It just means that the effort that we may have made an effort, but it wasn't enough to match what's happening outside. There weren't enough layers between us and that environment. Somehow we got exposed. A person who is aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching them. And so everything is easy to control with that realization. Problems begin with the gaze. When the heart is distracted from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the gaze goes in the wrong direction. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us, يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. He knows the betrayal of the eyes. He calls it betrayal. And khiyana is the opposite of amana. So it's almost like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying us that I've given these eyes to you. أَلَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُ عَيْنَيْنِ. I've given you these eyes. وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ. Can I trust you with them? Here they are. But can I trust you with them? So when a person uses their eyes in a trustworthy manner, they win the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if they don't, Allah calls it betrayal. Your eyes betrayed my trust. Like this, sometimes there's a betrayal of the ears, and sometimes there's a betrayal of the heart, and sometimes there's a betrayal of the tongue. So a person who knows this, and this is a trust that I have, I cannot betray my Creator. I cannot betray the one who created these eyes and gave them to me. They're going to be very careful about how they use them, and the moment they become careful about how they use them, they close off hundreds of doors of mistakes for themselves. Hundreds of avenues through which shar could reach them, they made themselves immune. But a person who does not have this concept, they will look at anything. ما زلت تتبع نظرة في نظرة في إثر كل مليحة ومليح وتظن ذاك دواء جرحك وهو في التحقيق تجريح على تجريح فذبحت طرفك باللحظات وبالبكاء ففؤادك منه جريح أي جريح أو ذبيح أي ذبيح. Letting the gaze follow anything that seems attractive, and it goes on, and then the heart is unable to control itself. The heart starts going crazy. Frustrations develop. Strange desires develop. A strange kind of a lust develops. And it imprisons the person. It renders them dysfunctional. It makes them its slave. And now this person is bound. They're tied and glued by these desires. They've shackled them. Where did it all start? This eye. When did the eye make a mistake? When it became detached from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the possessor of that eye, the owner of that eye, became detached from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We talk about identity issues. How do we present ourselves? How do we see ourselves living in the West? Is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah not enough as our identity? رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا. This is my identity. Allah is enough. Islam is enough. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is enough as an example. This is who we are. But instead of spending time nurturing this bond with Allah and His Rasul and Islam, we are so busy studying and observing what everyone else is doing. Our exposure to that, which attacks the foundation of deen, is greater than our exposure to deen itself. How then are we supposed to be content with deen? Even when we approach deen, we're looking at it through someone else's lens. You're not looking at deen with the eye of a believer in that deen. You're looking at deen through the lens of your teacher, through the lens of your friends, through the lens of those people that you look up to as your influencers. Even the way we are looking at deen is tainted. It's biased. Someone else's biases have been included in the way we look at our own deen. That's why there's so much doubt and hesitation. If we looked at our deen with an eye of iman, we'd go rushing towards every single aspect of this deen, like Sahaba radiallahu anhum went rushing. So when the prohibition of liquor came down, they didn't just say, oh great, we're not going to drink anymore. They shattered those bottles. Such a strange conundrum Muslims who come from Muslim countries that have been colonized walk around with a colonized mind. And Muslims who come here, they end up being colonized by society. And very few are those who are able to see Islam for what it is without looking at it through someone else's lens. So, coming back to these three core principles that every Nabi came with, and attaching ourselves to them in terms of Iman, in terms of learning about them, in terms of implementing them. Our Rabb is Allah. Our Master is Allah. We are His slaves. Everything we have belongs to Him. This life belongs to Him. All good things will be available to us if we please Him. We have no other master. We have no other owner. He is the King of all kings. We have one example, one model, and that is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His ways will always lead us to success. What we need out there are Muslims who are representing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not Muslims that are out there representing companies, representing schools, representing communities. We need people who walk around the world as ambassadors of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are the people who will change the world. These are the people that Allah's help will be with them. And even when they're quiet, they will be having an impact on the hearts of people. Because the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that powerful. By implementing the sunnah, they will attract people towards them. And people will feel compelled to ask them, what makes you like this? Why do you do this? How are you able to do this? So increasing our bond with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the beauty of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's ways is that in every era, people often ask this question, how do we implement the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He was here so long ago, that was then. Everything has changed. The beauty of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's ways is that they're everlasting. And in every era, in every generation, up till today, you will find true followers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Follow them. Look to them as your examples. Those who are on the path of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are your models. They are the ones you look up to. Those who are calling towards Him, talking and teaching about Him, practicing His ways, these are the people who will lead us closer to Him. And Akhirah, which is such a plain reality. If a person has Akhirah in front of them, it becomes easy to make sacrifices in this dunya. Not only that, it becomes easy to stay focused on what matters. A person who has Akhirah in front of them will never do anything to compromise that gain for some gain over here. And when Sahaba radiallahu anhum learned about Akhirah, as they learned about it, it became a living reality. They were living with Akhirah in front of them. They could envision Jannah and Jahannam. They could envision the torments and the pains of Jahannam that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had described. And they could envision the delights and the enjoyments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had described. And so that young man and young woman will never give up that Jannah and never risk going into that Jahannam for a short worldly pleasure. Relationships with people who have no commitment. This has become the trend of today. People who have no commitment, they have no stake, they have nothing to lose. They wouldn't sacrifice a thing for the other person. This is the kind of person you should be in a relationship with. One brother had an issue at an airport in the States. And they had messed up his flight. He had the boarding pass when they went there. They said, sorry, we don't have any record of you on this flight. There must be some kind of mistake. He was, of course, upset. And he said, look, is this boarding pass issued by your airline? Yes. Is this the flight that this boarding pass is for? Yes. Is my name on this? Yes. Then why am I not on it? They said, we're sorry, sir, there's been some kind of mistake on our part. We're calling our manager. So they called the manager and the supervisor. She was a lady, and she came very apologetically. And the first thing she did was she went and offered her hand. And this brother pulled his hand away. And she turned red in the face, angry, insulted. He said, I'm sorry. There was no insult intended, but I've already given this hand to someone. I cannot give it to anyone else. She broke down and started crying. She said, I wish I had someone like that in my life who was that low. We are walking around with so many inferiority complexes. We think that if we act too Islamic, people will think we're backwards. We ourselves are unable to see the beauty of this deen. Its power, its pureness. People are looking for something pure. It's here. We have it. We should enjoy it and we should share it with the world. One youngster was studying in the masjid, a student of deen. And a young girl from that area, she was coming and going and coming and going. And every time she would come, the boy is studying with a candle in front of him. So every time she passes by, he takes his finger and sticks it into the candle. And when it burns, he pulls it out. He goes back to his work. She comes by again, he puts his finger into the candle, burns it. Somebody was watching him from a corner of the masjid. They could see what he's doing with his hand, but they couldn't see what he's seeing. So they went up to him and they said, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Keep burning your finger. He said, no. That girl just kept passing by. Window is open. And I couldn't avoid looking at her. But the moment any thought came to my mind, I thought I should remind myself that the fire of Jahannam is much, much worse. If I can't bear this little candle, how will I bear that fire? These are people who are connected to Akhirah. They just won't compromise it for anything. They won't give it up for anything. وَلَعَذَابُ الْآخِرَةِ أَكْبَرُ وَلَعَذَابُ الْآخِرَةِ أَشَدُّ أَشَقُّ. It's more severe. It's devastating. It's immense. Our attachment with Akhirah, our attachment with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, our attachment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this becomes the basis for all our choices. Our identity crisis or confusion is for no other reason besides the fact that we haven't given enough time to our deen. And we haven't spent enough time being exposed to the true elements of our deen. And we have been overexposed to elements that compromise our deen, so we're confused. And for this, a reversal is required. Something has to change. That involves bringing ourselves into the right environment, with the right people, doing the right things for the maximum amount of time. We get it. Ultimately, you have to go back out into that world. You can't become a hermit. You can't go off and live in a cave. No one's asking you to do that. But what is needed is to increase your exposure to this environment and to these things so that you have the strength to withstand what's out there. Otherwise, you don't stand a chance. And this is something that has to be done on a daily basis. And everyone needs to raise the bar and raise the standard. In the homes, in the masajid, and those who are big enough to think for themselves should be thinking, where are they spending most of the time? If you spend most of your time in an environment of kufr, then don't be surprised when doubts and suspicions come into your mind. It's not something shocking that, oh my goodness, I had a doubt about my deen. Of course, you are simply, every single one of us is simply the product of the environment they've kept themselves in. That's all we are. In terms of our iman, in terms of our amal, we are just the product of the environment that we have been able to keep ourselves in. It doesn't matter how pious, how pure of a person you have, you put them into the wrong environment, they're finished. And you take the person who is in the worst state of iman and you bring them into a good environment, just the environment itself will wash that off. We take it for granted that we're Muslim. Take it for granted. My children are coming home to, we're a Muslim family. We pray, we fast. Maybe you pray and you fast. What efforts have you made in developing the values of your children? How much exposure do you have to the word of Allah, to the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How much exposure have you given to your children? And then what kind of environment do you have? You have a Muslim family, an Islamic household, but everyone's doing their own thing. It comes down to what you're exposed to. If our children come home, and from the time they're home till the time they go to sleep, they're exposed to stuff on some screen, on some device, and we're not aware of it, that's a really dangerous situation. But also dangerous is us to know that they're watching nonsense and doing nothing about it. Parents become happy, oh yeah, good, they're out of the way, they're not making any noise, they're sitting there. Meanwhile, they're glued to watching something. It's definitely not boosting their iman. It's definitely not growing them as Muslims. So what is it doing? Wasting their time? Exposing them to lahu? You know, there's a time and a place for recreation and enjoyment. But if that's all we're doing, we are destroying the intellectual faculties of our children and their spirituality. We're completely destroying it. Basically, we're telling them that you have two parts to your life. There's a part where you go to school and work, and the rest of it, you sit there in front of a screen, and the screen just does everything for you. All you got to do is watch. And as long as it's not haram, it's okay. Really? This is a productive use of our time? That as long as it's not haram, let them do as much of it as they want. Since when is that productive? And then we live in a time where social causes of social justice, are considered very important, and many causes are, in fact, very important. Social justice is a necessary part of maintaining a healthy society. But what's happening today is that people who are not grounded in these three things are raising the banner for various social justice causes and getting our children so passionate about those causes that they take them to the verge of doubting their deen, that this cause is what is real. Everything and anything that even seems contrary to it is wrong, even if it's my religion. And in some cases, in fact many cases that are in front of us, the people who raise those calls to these various social justice causes, they have other agendas. That, well, you're a part of this, but guess what? We're doing this and this and this as well. And if you're a part of this, you've got to be a part of this as well. And our kids say, okay, no problem. So girls, as an example, girls who go in to speak out for women who are victims of domestic violence, this is a social justice cause. This is a serious problem. Domestic violence is a serious problem. It needs to be addressed at many levels. This is the token banner that's used. That's what goes in. What comes out? Somebody who is speaking out against Islam altogether and saying Islam is unfair towards women. Taking off the hijab because it also for them is now a symbol of oppression. Whose words are those? Whose thoughts are those? Look what went in, look what came out. This is what I'm talking about. If we gave our children the tools to navigate, the tools to work with these things, they would be able to become champions of social justice without compromising their deen. I tell my young friends that next time you're invited to a cause, remember these words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Assist in matters of bir and taqwa. And do not assist in matters of ithm and udwan. Bir is dutifulness. Taqwa is piety. Ithm is anything that breaks the command of Allah. Udwan is any form of transgression against other people. Do not support those causes. Look at the root and look at the outcome. What lies at the root of this cause that I'm being invited to take part in? And what is the outcome? Once a person has done all of this, what kind of person do they become? Look at the examples of the people before you. What kind of person did they become? It's enough for you to understand whether you should be taking part in this and to what extent you should be taking part in it. Everything comes back to becoming more and more anchored with these three things. Tawheed, Risalah, and Akhir. And really, when we talk about challenges facing the Ummah or challenges facing the youth, it's all about these three things. And any suffering that's happening in the world, any mistakes and errors being made by Muslims anywhere in the world, it's because they have compromised one of these three things. So, let's take responsibility for a couple of things. Let's take responsibility for our own environment. We might not be able to control the environment outside, but we should take responsibility for the environment that we expose ourselves to. People have to go to school, they have to go to school. People have to go to work, fine. How are you going to protect yourself and insulate yourself while you're there? What's your plan? What kinds of people are you going to keep yourself with? What types of activities are you going to keep yourself occupied with so that you don't have time for the rubbish stuff? And staying busy is a big virtue. And giving yourself free time is destruction, especially in this day and age. Considering what the possibilities and what the options are, it's disaster for a person to have time on their hands. For youngsters, going to school, doing well at school, and while they're at school, maintaining their religious values and maintaining their religious identities and going there as ambassadors of Islam. You're not just going to school. You're going to the school as a representative of Islam. You're going with a flag of Islam in your hands. So be careful how you behave. Watch how you act. Watch who you speak with and how you speak with them. Learn to guard your gaze from a young age. Today, our kids' gazes are being perverted at a very young age. Guard your gaze from a young age. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it easier for you as you go through adolescence, as you get older and older and older. When you're home, keep yourself in an environment of deen for as much of that time as you possibly can. That means attachment with the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Spending the maximum amount of time in the masjid that you can. And the masajid need to think about how they can create structures, infrastructures to support the maximum number of youngsters spending time in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And your time at home, when you're with your family, you're looking after your family, you're looking after your parents, your siblings, doing stuff that you need to do. But even there, you're guarding your gaze, you're watchful of your time. You're not spending the time just surfing the net or just browsing through stuff or just going through random social media feeds, one after the other. We watch so much nonsense. You know what? Unfortunately, that's where our heads are filled with. Keep yourself busy with the studying of deen, no matter how old you are. When you go to sleep, you should drop dead. You're tired because you've used your days so well. Now you go to sleep and wake up. Do it all over again. For the adults, they're the responsible ones. They're the ones in charge of making the right environment. Raising the families based on these ethics, based on these morals. And then taking out the time to connect with every member of the family to make sure, how are they in terms of their deen, in terms of their iman? Are they feeling okay? Is everything all right? Is there anything that's disturbing them? So we have a long road ahead of us. We have a long road ahead of us. And we need to have, every family needs to have a plan for the preservation of its deen. Complacent parents, if parents become complacent, inactive, passive, taking things for granted, there's very little we can do for the next generation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect these youngsters. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill their hearts with iman and taqwa. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala imbue them and their hearts with a sense of pride in their deen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide them and keep them on the straight path. May Allah azza wa jal keep them amongst good people and good environments. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect their honor. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them the success of this world and the next world. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.
هذا القرآن يوحدنا لطريق الخير يوجهنا الله تعالى